Hey guys, welcome back to Inner West Youth. My name's Katie and I'm here today with Gab and Jono. And today we're looking at the topic of science and God. I think often we think of science and God as in a big conflict between one another, where we've got strong science on one side and then we have sort of weak God cowering in the corner on the other side. And so it's a really helpful topic for us to explore today. And so I want to ask you guys, why do you think we feel this? Why do we think that science and God are on opposing teams a lot of the time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a number of reasons. The first one is there are a lot of smart people that like to use their smartness to try and convince people that God doesn't exist. So Steven Pinker, for example, he says the findings of science imply that the belief system of all the world's religions are factually mistaken. And then Richard Dawkins, another smart guy, says that if you look at everything in the universe, there's clearly no designer. But then there are equally smart people like Daniel Hastings and John Lennox, who argue the opposite point, that science can actually point us towards the idea that there is a God. So the first reason is because smart people use their intelligence to try and disprove God. And they're an example of what are called new atheists. So new atheists are like a denomination of atheism where they don't just believe that there is no God. They actually believe that the belief in God is dangerous, and that when people believe in a God, then humanity is actually in trouble. So they're new atheists, and quite often new atheists are also keyboard warriors. So they get into online fights and you're like, oh, I'm just a little Christian. This guy's so compelling in his Facebook comment that obviously there's no God. And the next one is the Catholic Church. So there's a guy called Galileo, and he looked through a tube at the stars, and he said, actually, I think the Earth revolves around the sun.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? That was about 1633, and the Catholic Church are like, we don't actually like that. But they didn't like it not because it was science, and science was at odds with what they believed, but they didn't like it because Galileo was actually a Christian, and he was trying to argue that actually this idea that the Earth revolves around the sun is not at odds with the Bible. So the Catholic Church kind of shut him up, and they said, no, we'll do the Bible stuff, you do the telescope stuff. And atheists grabbed that and they said, well, obviously the church is fighting with this scientist, so they obviously hate one another. So they're kind of two reasons why we kind of believe that science and religion can't mix. And it's actually just a huge misunderstanding from the Catholic Church and this scientist.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think because of that dynamic, it's really easy to see Christianity and other religions as really old-fashioned, and they just kind of use their religion as a way of explaining away the things that they can't explain in the universe. So I don't understand how these things happen, so there must be a God behind it. And if that's the case, then as we understand more and more things about the world through science and through other means, there becomes less and less need for a God. But that's only true if that's your reason for believing in God for the first place. And actually that's a bit of a false assumption to make, and one that really sets us up to believe that science and God are in conflict with each other when they're actually not.
Yeah, I often feel that the part of the Bible that is referred to when we have this conversation is the book of Genesis, so the first book of the Bible, and that really feels at odds with science. That seems to be the place that we go to and say, this just doesn't fit with what I've learnt in science at school or what I'm hearing in the wider community. So how do we make sense of the book of Genesis, particularly in relation to science?
Yeah, I think the really key dynamic to understand is that the book of Genesis is not a science textbook. When I read the first 3 chapters of the Bible and it's telling me how God made the universe, it's not telling me a factual account of what God did to make the universe happen, because this book was written to people who lived thousands of years ago, who didn't have the same scientific understanding that we have. If they were to talk about the Big Bang or the inflation theory and particles warming up and then cooling down and then clustering together, it wouldn't mean anything to them. But Genesis was written in the style that it's written so that it made sense to those people and told them the important reality, not about how God made the world, but why he made the world and that he made the world. It tells us not how things are done, but the truth behind it, that there is a God who made the world and created it intentionally and with order. And so it would be wrong to read those chapters of the Bible as a science textbook. And when we see those apparent factual errors that Genesis is saying, oh, the world was created in 7 days, but scientists said it was 14 billion years, those are actually okay differences to point out, because that's actually not the point of what Genesis is trying to say.
So you're kind of touching on the fact that every question seems to have two answers. There's a scientific answer and there's a non-scientific answer. Right. So Gab, you have a science degree, is this correct?
That is correct.
How does a kettle boil?
How does a kettle boil? Well, you've got electrical energy coming in through the mains power, which is going through a heating element, which turns the electrical energy into heat energy, which is then transferred to the water and it gets hot.
Right. But could science tell me why the kettle is boiling?
Because of those reasons, right?
But it's also boiling because I turned it on so that I could make a cup of tea.
Right.
So, and both of those things are true and both of those things are valid. They're not at odds with one another. I know that I can intervene and create a scientific chemical reaction. And I also know that I can flick a switch and pour boiling water over a tea bag and make a cup of tea because I want to. Yeah. And both of those things are fine to say. Yeah. So in the same way, when science would say, oh, well, the Earth was created by the Big Bang, that would be the scientific answer. Right. Whereas the other answer could actually be the Earth was created and the whole universe was created because God wanted to create people because he wanted to love them. Is that a fair enough kind of?
Yeah, for sure. And you're really touching on an important aspect of that. We often talk about science as answering the why, like, why is this change happening? But actually, science can't answer that question. Science is very good at answering how things happen, how we can explain all the changes that we see or all the phenomenon in nature, but it can't explain the why behind it all. And that's where things like Christianity and religion come in, try and answer those deeper, bigger questions.
So to try and make Genesis answer how questions is like making a science textbook answer why questions?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. It's sort of like if I took a love poem to the shops to try and tell me what to buy, it wouldn't work because it's not a shopping list. It's the wrong type of writing to do the function that I'm trying to get it to do. And similarly, when we try and read Genesis and try and understand what it's telling us about how the world was made, we're trying to take a piece of writing and trying to use it for a purpose it wasn't intended for. We look at other books we read and we see that often the opening parts of the book are introducing us to the important themes in the book. So, in Harry Potter, you read up the first chapters and you find out who Harry is and how he's secretly a wizard and how, he's actually lost his parents to this evil wizard, Voldemort, and it sets up this conflict between him and Voldemort, which goes on for the whole rest of the book. Well, what Genesis is doing is it's introducing us to God, it's introducing us to his world, and it's introducing us to the problem of sin in that world, which God made to be good, but is no longer the way he made it to be because of sin. And that's actually the purpose of Genesis. It's not to tell us how the world was made. It's teaching us why God made the world, and it's introducing us to the themes of the Bible, which will be important as we try and understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to see that those two things are maybe not as much as odds as we initially think, and by all means do science and know about the world, but also don't miss the point. As we looked in the first week about the overarching story of the Bible, which is to actually know God. And so exploring both of those things are really important and valid things to do, but don't miss the point of the Bible and using it for things that it's not intended to do. Yeah. It's been great to explore this topic with you guys today. And we might not have addressed your particular questions about science, and I encourage you to keep exploring them with your leaders and in discussion groups and keep having those conversations. But we will see you next time for more of our videos for Inner West Youth.
Thanks for watching the video. We are Inner West Youth. If you want to see more content from us, we have an Instagram. It's @InnerWestYouth, and we have a YouTube channel as well. I know what the YouTube channel is. What's the YouTube channel? We don't know what the YouTube channel is, but probably you're watching this video on it right now, so you're right there.